today, as well as Phillies President of Baseball Operations, Dave Dombrowski, Phillies General Manager, Sam Fold, and Phillies Manager, Joe Girardi. If you'd like to ask a question to any of these four, please utilize the hand raise feature and we'll get to as many as we can. So before we get started, I'm going to turn it over to Dave for a few brief comments, and then we will open it up for questions. Dave, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Just thanks to everybody for being here today. Appreciate that. And exciting day for the Philadelphia Phillies organization and for our fans and our players to welcome JT back into the organization. As we know, one of the best players in Major League Baseball. So for us, it's a big day. We're happy to have him back on board. And I know I'm thrilled to be able to watch him play day in and day out for the next time period in my career. I've had many texts and notes from friends of mine in the game of baseball that have said you're going to enjoy the time period of watching him play. So I'm looking forward to that. So we look forward to having many good times together and good years together as an organization. So JT, congratulations.
Thank you.
And with that, we'll start off with Rob Motti of the Associated Press, and then we'll go to Bob Brookover of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hey, JT, congratulations. Throughout this whole process, I know it was difficult for you at times, and you had to think about a lot of things. Was there a point where you thought that maybe this wasn't going to happen, that you may have to go somewhere, and then to be able to get it done, to be able to come back to Philly? Just talk a little bit about how important that is to you and the relationship that you've had with not just the team and some of the players, but the fan base too as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a bit of a slow off season. I think across baseball, everybody's experiencing that. I was pretty aware going into it that was going to be the case. So there wasn't really ever a time where I felt like, this being back with the Phillies or whatever just wasn't going to work out. I knew the process would play itself out how it was supposed to. And I'm really just glad to be back, glad it worked out the way it did. For the organization, my teammates, they brought me in, like I was their own right away. The fans embraced me right away. They were good to me from day one. They treated my family great, so it was important to us. We haven't been shy about how much we love playing for the Phillies, so we're just really excited and grateful for the opportunity that they've given us.
Hey, JT, congratulations. How much do you feel like the bullpen, you were responsible in any way for what the struggles of the bullpen last year? And how much have you thought about that? And what do you think you can do to help it get better? I know you were limited behind the plate last year by injury somewhat, but how much have you thought about that and how much do you think you can help it improve?
Yeah, I mean, as a catcher, that's part of your job. You take it personal when any of your pitchers struggle. So to be there and go through that with our bullpen last year, that was definitely tough on me. I thought about it all off season long. I've been trying to dive into stuff and things we could have done differently. So I definitely take that personal, and it's something that I have to improve on is working with those guys better and helping them become the best pitchers they can be. There's a lot of ways we can do it. So we just got to get to spring training, get to work and make it happen.
Was there anything you were able to put your finger on as to why the struggles happened?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. We didn't strike a ton of guys out, and we allowed late in games, guys were putting the ball in play more than they should have been. So with that being said, we gave up a lot more soft contact hits than anybody in the league. And especially late in the game, we had some really bad luck. So a lot of things just didn't go in our favor. So hopefully with a little better luck next year, that can change. But obviously, there's a lot of adjustments on the mound. We got to pound the zone better. We can't put guys on base for free. We had too many free passes last year, and we got to put guys away when we get them to 2 strikes and not make that mistake pitch and give them the chance to put it in play.
And if I could, I just wanted to ask Joe. Joe, at the end of last season, one of the things you said, you were asked what can you do to improve. I think number one on that list was defense. Obviously, the bullpen was on that list. Getting JT back goes a long way to having a good defense. But the way your lineup and positions look right now, it's going to be very similar to last season. What do you think can be done to make your team a better defensive team?
Well, I think you look at every player that's out there and you look at where they have strengths and where they have weaknesses, and we'll attack their weaknesses, whether it's going to the left, whether it's going in, whether it's going to the right, going back. I mean, that's for all catchers, all players. I know for me, like I could block to my right better than I block to my left. So I used to attack it every spring training and work really hard during the season. And we will do those things. hopefully we'll be able to consistently put people in the same position when we start spring training, in a sense. So, you know, we're not moving guys around trying to figure it out. They'll get comfortable and make vast improvements.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Kristen Rogers of Fox 29, and then Jim Salisbury of NBC Sports Philly.
Hey, JT, this is a little bit more of a lighthearted question, but obviously last season there were all of the signed JT signs that we saw and the chants. And I know you said you didn't want to address it at that point, but what does this mean for you again, coming back to this fan base that has really rallied so hard for you to come back here?
Yeah, I mean, that was honestly a big factor in us loving Philly so much. You know, it's the fan base embraced us from day one, and the excitement that they showed for me personally as a player, not only just the team, but, you know, they kind of backed me from day one. And that was always, I really appreciated that. You know, I would talk to my wife about it all the time, about how different it was playing there and feeling that from the fan base and feeling the support from them. And that really does make a difference for a player. So it's definitely appreciated.
Hey, JT, congratulations.
What's up, John?
Jim.
Jim, sorry.
No
Thank
problem. He's better looking than me.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, how is your hip? Did it linger into the off season? And I have two questions. One about the hip. How is it? How long did it linger? And what was the actual diagnosis, and where do things stand now?
The hip's great. It did linger into the offseason. You know, honestly, the playing on it the last week, and then specifically the last day of the season, almost kind of took me back to square one, to where it took me probably 3 weeks into the offseason to where I felt 100%. So it wasn't anything that hindered my progress or anything. I still worked out the same and everything, just some little movements. I would feel a little tightness in the hip, but that only lasted, 3 or 4 weeks into the off season. The diagnosis was just a hip flexor strain. So it was a grade 1, so it wasn't too bad. It was just a strain that really just needed time to heal. And we tried to come back. I want to say I took 8 or 9 days off when the injury happened. And it's, like I said, it was probably a 3-week injury. So when I came back, I wasn't 100%, but once we got to 3 or 4 weeks in the offseason, I haven't felt it since.
And I also wanted to ask you, because you were so open a year ago about, setting new markets for catchers, raising the bar for all catchers. Joe Mauer's AAV was $23 million. And that was he signed that contract, I think, more than a decade ago. And your AAV is going to be 23.1. So it's only nudged up a little bit in terms of AAV for the top catcher on the market. Do you feel like you moved the needle enough compared to where you wanted to go in this thing, or did the pandemic affect it? Are you disappointed with how much you were able to move it? Could you kind of give us your feelings about that?
To be honest, moving the market in that sense wasn't really always the most important thing to me. I was happy that, obviously, in my opinion, catchers are a little devalued in baseball, whether it be because, the long-term contracts haven't really panned out, or because in theory we age fast, or whatever that may be. It's a little tougher for catchers when they get up in age, and it's tougher to get those long-term deals. And quite frankly, that average annual value is not as high as other, top position players at their position. So for whatever reason that is, I was happy to not let that go backwards, and I know it's been a long time since Mauer had his deal. So it's a little different scenario that baseball's in, but I think post-pandemic, we're pretty happy with the deal that we got.
Okay. Thanks, JT.
Next, we'll go to Jamie Apodi of 6ABC, and then Matt Gelb of The Athletic.
JT, you were talking about the fans welcoming you back, but there was a similar pressure put on by your teammates, social media wise. Archie, who's just new here, started a hashtag, and Bryce was out, and a lot of guys. I see you smiling. How did that make you feel to see your teammates putting pressure on the organization to bring you back?
Yeah, the smile says it all, It's like I said, I'm just grateful to have teammates like that, to have the fan base we have. But they've supported me from day one. That my teammates are, they become my best friends. They become family for me. So we stayed in contact all off season long. They were pulling for me, they were rooting for me. But the pressure that they put on the organization, I'm not sure if that made a difference or not. But it always put a smile on my face, and I love to see it.
To follow up with that, how good do you think this group can be this year?
Very good. I mean, I think obviously we have a long road ahead of us. We have to make some adjustments, and we have to get better. Bottom line, there's offensively, defensively, pitching, specifically with defense and pitching. There's a lot of improvements we can make. That the talent is there. We just have to put it together and work hard in spring training, and we'll see how it goes.
For Dave, I'm wondering why is it the Phillies think that JT will be able to age well into his mid-30s? JT referenced it. I mean, the catchers, are known in this sport for not aging well, but JT his career so far would seem like he's an outlier. Why is it the Phillies believe that a 5-year bet, as JT goes into his mid-30s, is going to work out?
Well, I think there's a few usually, and again, you can pick exceptions everywhere, that if you have quality performers, which JT is, their aging process is a little bit different than others. He's a quality performer. He's athletic. He's talented in that regard, hardworking. So all the things that you would indicate to try to look at longevity would project into what JT has. So we think that you're in a position where, sure, maybe at 35, you're not the same at 34, or the same at 30. But when you start falling off a little bit, and where he is starting from up above to where it would be, we look at that as being a quality big league performer at that time.
And JT, from your perspective, why do you think you're in your position to age better than the average catcher into your 30s? Have you talked to catchers about how they maintain themselves and as they get further along in their career?
No, I haven't necessarily talked to other catchers about that. I've worked with certain doctors and certain trainers to try to keep my body in the best shape that I can, to perform as long as I can. And I just think my athleticism will take me a long ways, as long as I continue to work hard and continue to keep my body in shape, continue to come to the season as ready as I can. I don't see why I wouldn't be able to last a little longer than other catchers, just because kind of athletically, I'm a little more advanced than most catchers are, not all obviously, but so I feel like that gives me an edge to where even if I decline a little bit athletically, I'll still be ahead of the game as far as most catchers are concerned.
Next, we'll go to Todd Zalecki of MLB.com and Matt Breen of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hey, JT, we know that you had lunch with Dave and his wife just before Christmas. Your wife is there as well, I guess. I'm just curious, what can you tell us about that lunch? Did it help at all in terms of your willingness to re-sign?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely helped. We walked away from that meeting, in the car on the way home, talking about how impressionable Dave and his wife were and how nice they were, and how we could tell how genuine they were. And obviously the success speaks for itself that he's had. But that meeting, it was that was honestly the first thing that happened in the offseason for us, is other than a couple of Zoom calls. But that was the first time we could walk away from in the offseason and feel confident about what was going on. We felt like Philly was going to be a good place for us again. And, he just made a good impression on us.
Did Dave give you anything about his vision of the organization and where it could go in the next couple of years that maybe made you feel better about where you guys could go in the next couple of years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he talked to me about him and John's thoughts and where they saw the organization going, and kind of some of the stuff in the media that was reported wasn't quite as accurate, which happens, but he kind of laid rest to some of that stuff and let us know that, the organization is in a place to try to win and try to win. He mentioned, John said that he wanted this Phillies team to be one of the best teams ever. So, that sunk with me and gave me the confidence that they want to go out there and get back to the postseason.
Thanks, man.
This is for Sam. Sam, you were around the clubhouse the last 2 seasons. Was there anything in particular that struck you about JT that made you want to push to sign into a 5-year contract?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. We talked about like our confidence in JT being able to be a really productive catcher for a long time, and that's just not like a hunch. That's based off of what we've seen from JT on a day-to-day basis. I mean, it's commitment. What you guys see between the lines is like incredible stuff, but what you see outside the lines is, I would say, just as impressive. I mean, his commitment in the weight room. I mean, talking to our nutritionist, Alexa Scully, last night, and she's like, I'm so excited that JT's coming back. He's so committed. He's like a model citizen, and he's committed to being as good as he can for as long as he can. And like those kinds of players and teammates, they don't grow on trees. And so it makes us feel a little extra confident that he's going to be really good for a long time.
And Joe, JT's caught more than any other catcher in the last 4 years. You caught. How hard is that? We just look at a number, but as a catcher, how tough is that to do that day in and day out?
It's a real physical grind, obviously, and as much as I never caught as much as JT, but it's also a mental grind too. And I think he handles both aspects of it very, very well. The question was asked, what impresses you the most about JT? To me, it's his preparation. And because he prepares so well in everything he does, that will help him play a lot of games. And, I would walk by JT's locker and he would be in his locker writing notes down about the pitcher that day and how they were going to get the hitters out. And I think the greatest compliment you can give a player from a manager standpoint is I can pencil JT in and never worry about him. Never worried that he's prepared, never worried that he's going to do his job, that he's going to give you his best effort. In there and you move on. And, I would say from a standpoint, JT's a little bit of a freak of nature because he's such a great athlete, and you don't necessarily see such great athletes there. That's a special commodity. He's a special commodity that we have, and I just look forward to watching him work the next 5 years because it's fun to watch.
Thanks, guys.
Next, we'll go to Howard Eskin of Sports Radio 94 WIP, and then we'll go to Scott Lauber of the Philadelphia Inquirer.
This question is for Dave. Dave, the Phillies obviously had a really good idea of the market for JT, and I assume that's why you waited as long as you did. Why do you think the market was not where a lot of people thought it should have been, either for catchers or for JT?
Well, I don't ever really know that because you don't know what other people are doing. But I think what happens is you do your own research as much as you possibly can. And a lot of times it's supply and demand in a particular year. So sometime when you look at this year, there really haven't been many clubs looking for big name catchers so happen where they were spending their resources. Sometimes that happens. I've been in other situations where it's a dynamic, all of a sudden somebody's a very explosive market. But I would say that was probably one of the reasons. I'm not sure why. For example, one club that anticipated spending dollars this winter catching were the Mets. Well, the Mets moved quickly and made another signing and then spent their dollars in other places. So I don't really know why other people do what they're doing. But when you're looking, then I don't think there was anybody else that had spent a lot of money that had the needed catching this year.
Thank you.
Sure.
JT, you mentioned the bullpen earlier and the struggles that it had last year. They've added some pieces to that bullpen this offseason, but the biggest one would be Archie Bradley. Do you know Archie at all? I know you guys probably grew up about 2 hours away from each other. I know Oklahoma is a big state, but did you know each other at all growing up in high school, ever play against each other? And from what you do know about him, how much can he help this group?
Actually, no, to be honest, growing up, we never really crossed paths. We were actually supposed to play on the same summer ball team the year I got drafted. I didn't end up playing on that team, but that was really the only time I would have ever played with him or against him. But obviously, being from Oklahoma, not a ton of huge names come out of Oklahoma in baseball. So I always followed his career very closely. We got to know each other playing against each other when he was in Arizona. Talked quite a bit about Oklahoma and where we'd been and all that stuff. So got to know him in that way. But as far as him and helping our bullpen out, I know from facing him, the guy's a competitor and he has a lot of confidence in himself and in his stuff. And that's what you need back there. When he's coming into the game, that he's going to be prepared and he's going to be as confident as he needs to be to get those outs. And he's done it in the postseason. He's done it in the regular season. He's been one of the more effective relievers, a few years in a row now. So I'm just extremely excited to get to work with him and get to become closer to him and have him getting outs for us.
Thank you.
Let's go to Megan Montemurro of The Athletic and then Tom Moore of the Bucks County Courier-Times.
Hey, JT, congrats. Since coming to Philadelphia, your pitch framing behind the plate has really seen a lot of improvement in terms of metrics. And so I was just curious, with that type of improvement, have you seen any impact on the rest of your game defensively with investing in that part of your game?
I feel like just catching as a whole the last few years for me has changed a lot. Kind of changed my setup a little bit, which in turn helped me become a lot better receiver, but it also helped me blocking wise. I feel more comfortable behind the plate. I was in a traditional stance for me. I'm not as comfortable as I am with one knee down. So just when I came over to Philly, Craig Driver and Stumpo and Dusty, they all had the confidence in me to be able to be a little more athletic back there and catch from, not such a traditional stance. And then giving me that confidence has just made me become a better defensive catcher overall.
And Joe, getting to watch JT work on a daily basis, especially in game, what has stood out to you? Maybe small things that other people wouldn't notice that have stood out to you.
Well, when JT talks about, not catching from the more traditional stance, his range blocking on one knee is incredible to me, right? The way he moves on one knee, he moves better than most people on 2 feet. That really stands out to me because it's interesting to watch because, when I see a guy on one knee, sometimes you worry a little bit about, certain things, but JT is so athletic. He's able to do it. He's more comfortable. I think it saves him physically a lot of wear and tear. It also makes him a better offensive player because he has his legs under him more. I'm just amazed at how well he moves around. It's fun for me to watch. And when you get a catcher that is that athletic and that committed to his trade, you get a player like JT.
Thanks.
For Dave, I was wondering if this signing and bringing back Didi Gregorius is an indication that management's maybe more optimistic about the Phillies' financial picture in 2021 than maybe it seemed on your introductory Zoom call back in December 10th.
Well, I don't know if we're more optimistic. I think a lot of that would be attributed to John Middleton and the Buck family that have been willing to step up and do things for us to try to make us better as a ball club. So there's still so many uncertainties going forward, and basically the uncertainties are still all COVID related because we're not sure the number of fans that we're going to be able to put in the ballpark, particularly early in the year, but as the year progresses. So as we sit here today, that uncertainty still exists, but I think it's more a situation where I think what they do, that they're trying to allow us to put the best club possible that we can on the field, and also provide entertainment for the fans. So I think it's really an ownership-driven decision that they've made.
Let's go to Destiny with Phillies Nation, and then we will go back to Realmuto.
Hey, this question's for Dave. As far as the rest of the offseason goes, do you guys see yourself adding another pitcher? Is it to the bullpen? Is it to the starting rotation? What's going on there?
Well, we continue to, right now, there's still a lot of free agents out there. So I still think you're looking at value in some ways. Ideally, we would like to add it. There's a couple of pending things that we're not in the position that we've announced because sometimes things have to go through physicals before you can actually announce them as a club. So we're in a position where I think pitching still remains a priority for us. But as you continue to move on, you also fine tune your club in other ways. I mean, we had a gaping hole at catcher that's changed. Well, I guess we can talk about shortstop at another time. We try to get some pitching depth. We can talk about that at another time. So as you continue to eliminate and try to approach some of these holes, well, then you start talking about other things. So how does your bench look, for example? Can you do something there? Because every club can get better. I don't care how good a club you are, you can always get better. So those are things that we do, but you also, we're doing now, but you also look at then how much finances you spent in other places. So that's become more clear for us, but I would still say pitching continues to be something that's a focus, both not only with guys on your big league roster, but non-roster invitees that we like, that we think might have a chance to help us, particularly in the bullpen. And then we also continue to look at our bench.
Hey, Dave, this question is also for you. When you look back at this whole process, I know the pressure from the fan base to sign JT was strong, but as we've talked about throughout, about pressure coming from internally, from other players, from Bryce, from Archie, from other guys, how much was that a factor? Did you think about that? How could we potentially not sign JT and justify to our players that we're not bringing this guy back? And were there conversations with whether it was Bryce or other players about the importance of having JT?
Well, I didn't have any conversation with the players on that type of situation. I mean, it's easy to follow what their notes are, and they're in the paper all the time, and the support for JT. And I mean, when you're sitting in my shoes, it's easy to understand. You're talking about the best catcher in Major League Baseball. And if you don't re-sign them or you lose them, you're not going to be as good as you can at that position. It's not going to happen. So, I mean, not that you can assume you're going to sign him, and it's okay. What other alternatives do you have behind the plate? How can you make yourself better at other positions? Those are the type of discussions that you end up having. But we never, ever wanted to be in a position where we would lose JT. And that was from ownership, John Middleton, the Bucks. When I talked to them from the first day I got on board, it was, geez, we'd really love to keep JT. We'd really love to keep JT. Then when you talk to Joe, you talk to your staff members, everybody was unanimous in that support. So, of course, you pay attention to the fans. There's a passion there, which is great. Teammates want to have them on board. You pay attention to all those type of things, but you still have to make a decision on how you realistically think what makes sense for you as an organization from player perspective, a cost perspective, how you appropriate your dollars. But all along, you pay attention to all of them. But we always, from every end of it, wanted to bring JT back.
All right, we have time for a few more, so let's go back to Matt Breen and then Jim Salisbury.
Hey, JT. Seems like spring training, the start date is at least a little bit uncertain right now. Like, where do you stand 2 weeks away from camp? With the uncertainty, do you prepare as if it's going to start on time as normal? And what's the conversations like amongst your teammates about that?
Yeah, I think as far as we know now, we're expecting to start on time, so we have to prepare for that. If things change, then we can kind of throttle back. But the most important thing is that we be prepared when spring training starts. And as of now, we don't have a different start date than what we've been given, so we have to prepare for that, and then we'll make adjustments if need be.
And when you look at your 5-year contract, and Gelb had mentioned earlier, how do you envision yourself going through that? But would a DH, would you use the DH last year? Would you be in favor of that? Would it help you maybe take you off your legs a couple days and give you a break throughout a season, especially if you look at a 5-year deal, 5 years of that?
I haven't thought too much about the DH. I'm sure it could help me in the long run, or DHing, 5 or 10 games a year, but I'm a catcher, so I want to be behind the plate. I want to catch as many games as I can while staying healthy and while helping my career longevity. So if the DH helps that out, then I'm all for that. And I think it will a little bit, but I still want to be behind the plate and I still want to be catching for this team.
JT, when this thing got done, what was the first thing Bryce texted you?
Let's go.
Let's go.
Yeah, with a lot of exclamation points.
Moments later.
Yeah, it didn't take too long. Well, actually, I think the first thing he said is, "Are the rumors true?" or something. I think that was before it was official, And so I let him know, yeah, we're getting close. And then when it was official, he was pretty excited.
Did you receive any other offers?
Did I receive other offers
from other clubs?
I'm gonna leave that for someone else to speak about.
Okay. And Dave, did you actually have a plan B that you were maybe ready to move on or getting close to moving on?
Yeah, we had other plans. We were hoping we didn't ever have to use them, but yes, we had other plans.
I mean, were you inching toward, implementing Plan B, or were you pretty confident that you were going to get this to the finish line at a certain point?
Well, I think the way to say is that we were prepared, that it's like you have to be, because I really never knew what was going to happen until you get to that position. So until you finally say it's a deal and they sign it, you always have to have something in the back of your mind, at least, okay, to be prepared to move forward in another direction if it so happens.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
All right, we have time for two more, so let's go back to Bob Brookover, and then we'll finish up with Megan Montemurro.
Dave, to go back to the DH thing with JT, I know he wants to be a catcher, but when you're trying to do a long-term deal, you once signed Victor Martinez, and I know wasn't JT defensively, but he became a pretty good DH for you. Does it give you some level of comfort when you have that designated hitter to fall back on, especially a player with with JT's offensive prowess?
Well, sure. I mean, I think it does if you have it. I mean, there's been a significant difference. I've been in the American League for the last 15 years, so coming back to the National League, and when I talk to National League general managers, they put their club together differently than they do in the American League. Having a DH, it changes your thought process, and if you have players that are good offensive players, being in a position where they can help you in the DH role, that's great. But you deal with the hand that's dealt with you at that particular time, and you'll tackle it. I would anticipate JT being able to catch a lot of games for the next 5 years. So now, still, even let's say last year when he's in a position of being a catcher and having the availability to slide over there, take a day off behind the plate, catch your legs up, just get a rest from working behind there, and then having a chance to step in the DH role. It's always a welcome break when you have a good bat like that.
Are you comfortable right now with how you're set up? If there is a DH, and how uncomfortable is it not knowing even?
Well, yeah, I think we're comfortable doing it. Do you wish you knew exactly how the rules would be? Sure. I think that would also be advantageous. But right now we're proceeding as if we're not going to have a DH in the National League. And if they tell you that you will, we have a lot of we have a good offensive team. That's the way I look at it. I mean, it's a strength of our ball club is our offense. And when you go around at different positions, it gives us a lot of availabilities for somebody to take a break on a particular day without having a full-time DH. So that's up to Joe and how he decides to use it. But there's a lot of guys that can swing the bat, and then he can slide into the DH role on a particular basis and play one of the extra guys on the bench. So I think we're set up pretty well for that, yes.
Thank you.
JT, during the season, you were pretty adamant about not wanting to talk about contract stuff and all that. So I was just curious, now that obviously it's resolved, how much did that weigh on you? How hard was it to not think about, free agency coming up, and maybe especially after you did get injured, and we're trying to fight back to come back with the team in playoff contention?
To be honest, it wasn't everything to me during the season. I was more focused on the task at hand and playing the season strong and trying to get to the playoffs. Once the season ended was when, the contract stuff started picking up a little bit. And I was thinking a lot more about it, obviously, in the off season. And even with everything being so slow, it was still a daily conversation, with agents and my family. But during the actual season, I put a lot of pressure on myself every single season. I want to go out there and be the best catcher I can and be the best player I can for my teammates. So that pressure comes from the wanting to be the best I can, not so much from wanting to, have the big contract or I wasn't thinking as much about that as I was going out there and performing.
Thanks.
All right, JT, Dave, Sam, Joe, thank you for joining us today. Everyone stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, JT and everybody.
Bye-bye.